Welcome back to Boilers Extra. I'm Nathan Baird from Indianapolis Star.
Sam King from the Journal and Courier.
We are just a few days away from Purdue football's season opener against Ball State. It's been about a month of us hanging out at almost every practice in some form or fashion. Did not see the Saturday practices, including the scrimmages, but saw a lot of other things in preseason camp. And I think we're eager to find out on Saturday and beyond what our eyes told us in the preseason, how that meshes with actual competition. We're going to get into some of the questions that you guys sent us. We asked for some questions on Twitter and X. And I think it leads well into some of the things we need to talk about, specifically in previewing the season. We're not really going to preview this Ball State game as much. We'll do that a little bit later in the pod when we give our preseason or our predictions for that game in particular. But Purdue didn't release a depth chart this week, so I would because Barry Odom said if he put one out, he wouldn't know what to put on it. Believe that if you will. But we put one out. We talked about it extensively on the pod last week, Sam. I think the one that you did this week that's on jconline.com and indystar.com mirrors that pretty closely. But I think all things taken into account, Purdue is opening the season pretty healthy.
Yeah, there's a couple guys who probably would be starters or key contributors if fully healthy. Three that come to mind immediately, but nothing significant. I think that going through a fall camp and being as healthy as Purdue is entering game one is about the most you could ask for if you're Barry Odom and the coaching staff.
Purdue will put out the status report. That'll come out Saturday, probably 10 a.m. It's usually 2 hours before the game, roughly. So come to jconline.com, come to indystar.com. Those will be posted there. And any additional news that kind of surrounds that as we're watching warm-ups before the game, we'll pass it along there. So let's just get right into it. We had some questions that I think really sort of frame this season and what people are still kind of wondering about as it relates to what kind of team Purdue can be in 2025. And our first question comes from, I want to acknowledge the people who sent us the question, comes from Dale Bullion. It's always tricky when it's the Twitter accounts because you never know if that's their actual name or not. Sometimes it's obvious, but we'll assume this actually is a man named Dale Bullion. Asked, will the offensive line be dominant enough to open holes for the running back and the quarterbacks? And Sam, I guess just from what you've seen in preseason camp, how would you characterize where this offensive line is right now? And can it be the kind of offensive line that sort of dictates terms to opponents and for a team that we think does want to run the ball, or at least establish the run in a significant way this season?
Yeah, I don't know that this line is going to be dominant most games, but I think it is going to be significantly upgraded from what people have been accustomed to the last couple of years, maybe even beyond that. And Jeff Brown for years struggled getting offensive linemen, and it was almost like getting transfers to patch holes several years. And then he was creative enough with the offense to not exploit a weakness if there was one on the offensive line. But I think this line can be pretty good, and I think that there's some nice depth there. For example, a guy like Marquise Easley coming from Georgia, I thought just based on, what his high school prospectus was and the fact that he'd been at Georgia would come in and be probably an instant starter. He's not, at least based on what we've seen. He's probably that second group of guys. So there's a lot of guys that are, probably, for Purdue would be very good gets for the offensive line. Joey Tonona, if he's back to, what he was supposed to be coming out of high school when he went to Notre Dame before his car accident, if he's developed back into that kind of a player, that's a big time get for Purdue to take him last year and wait patiently for him to get back to where he was. Jalen St. John, I think, is very good. He's a guy that played tackle, I think, or played guard at Arkansas, played tackle the last 2 years at UNLV, and now he's playing guard again. I think he can be very good. McKean Coley is a guy that was at Purdue last year and didn't play a ton, but he did play some, and sounds like he's doing a lot better. But we need to see against actual competition. We've seen them going against the same guys every day, but to answer the question in short, I don't think that it's going to be a line that dominates people, but I think it will be good enough to do some things offensively. I really think that Devin Maccabee is going to have a career year in terms of statistics. And that's, he rushed for 968 yards as a freshman 3 years ago. So that tells you that I think this line can open up some holes for him. And then Ryan Brown's ability to move with his legs is going to help quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I just don't think we're at a stage where we can assume any part of this team will be dominant. And that's not a knock against anyone. It's just, it's very new. We haven't seen this group of players intact play against other players, and we won't really know a lot about this team. I feel like this kind of reminds me of last year a little bit. There was, the first game against Indiana State, and then they play Notre Dame, and you find out a whole lot more. And boy, did we in that second game. And I think similarly this year, these first two games, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the preseason prediction, the kind of the season prediction part. But that USC game is the one that is hanging out there that like, oh, okay, that's going to be one that tells us a lot about this team. But as far as the offensive line and specifically, I have thought that this looked like it could be a pretty solid group. They had to figure out who was going to play center. We'll come back to that topic, I think, a little later in this pod. I really think the left side could be strong. I mean, Jalen St. John was like some level all Mountain West Conference kind of player. Joey Tonona was a prospect who went to Notre Dame for a reason. Like he was a big time prospect at one point. Like those two guys playing side by side, I think not only helps you protect the quarterback, but you can start playing downhill in the run game behind those guys. I think you might have something there. And also now in conjunction, Braden Joyner in the middle, if that is the starting center, which they're treating like a state secret, but it sure looks like he is going to be the starting center. Now you start matching him up with the guards, St. John and Ethan Trent on either side. And yes, I think this offensive line can open up the run game. I will say 2 points. Number one, the quarterback run is the most dangerous weapon in a freelance situation. That's what really drives defensive coordinators crazy, is when you do the right thing and this guy still breaks out. And Ryan Brown, I think, can do that. He's going to be hard to tackle. I think that's where the quarterback running game is the most important with this offense, that it can force defenses to have to account for that. And you're going to have to spy him even to some extent. And what does that open up in the passing game if you can take advantage of that? Still a lot of X factors there. And then B, I think there's reason to think that Devin Maccabee could have like a big season. But much like last season, how well Devin Maccabee – I'll take that back because he ran the ball pretty well last year. How much Devin Maccabee runs the ball is very much a byproduct of how the offense as a whole executes. And by that, the passing game becomes just as important as the running game, because you have to have balance. Not necessarily when we talk about offensive balance, it's not balance in terms of distribution. Like you have to have some kind of 50-50 split between runs and passes. Most teams don't do that. But what you have to have is 50-50 in terms of the respect that a defense has, or something close to 50-50. They have to believe that your running game can hurt them in downs that aren't just obvious passing downs too. And that's going to open up things for the run game. So that's kind of the thing I'm waiting on to see is this passing game ready to go out and challenge Big Ten teams? And what does that mean for the running game? Those things definitely will play off of each other. Do you think, Sam, that this, if you had to pick, no, we'll save that. We're going to come back to that because I think it plays into this next question.
Kind of going to your point real quick, since I just wrote this for something I'm posting either later today or tomorrow morning. Devin Maccabee last year averaged a career best 4.98 yards per carry. He only carried the ball 138 times because Purdue was playing behind from 7-0, 14-0, 21-0, by the end of the first quarter, almost every single week.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That was definitely a factor too. But I think that was a factor in part because, you're behind, but you're also behind because the offense often just never got started. Mm-hmm. And third downs are going to be important. Third downs are going to be Devin Maccabee's first down friend this season. If they can convert more third downs, he's going to get more carries on first down. Right. I went back and did the math. Like he should probably be like, if he had kept that average up last year, but kept up also his per game carries average, what it should have been historically for his career coming into last season. He should be like 150, 170 yards farther down the line on that career rushing list. And that's a huge difference. Like when you start talking about a guy only needing to like barely crack 1,000 yards to be this program's all-time leading rusher, like that's very different than expecting him to rush for 1,200 and some yards and to be the all-time leading rusher. So that's been talked about. We talked about it here. I wrote a little bit about it. I don't think there's a reason to like keep ramming that down their throats, but it's just something that I think it last year proved that Devin Mockabee is talented. Devin Mockabee can be a catalyst for this offense, but the passing game has to help, or you're going to find an offense that's stuck in neutral. Let's go on to this question from Northern Boiler, who asked for X factors for on offense and defense. He's asking specifically for the Ball State game. I guess I'm not going to look at it in terms of like strategically who are the X factors to help them beat Ball State, because frankly, maybe I'm wrong. I'm just not respecting Ball State probably to that level. Like I don't think it comes down to like one or two guys as it will in some Big Ten position battles that we'll encounter later in the season. But I think there are the way I looked at it was, who do I want to see something from on Saturday that tells me if they are in the right direction in certain aspects? So I don't know how you would have thought of that, but Sam, who's your X factor on offense as we go into Saturday?
First of all, Northern Boiler, probably not the real name of that person.
No, I don't believe that's his Christian name. No.
This has varied for me, but the receivers were so almost useless last season outside of the tight end that is the position group I want to see the most out of. And a name that I really hadn't put a whole lot of thought into until today after practice was Nitro Tuggle among that group. He's a sophomore, played at Georgia last year. He's from Indiana and was a big-time prospect who just, didn't get a lot of opportunity at Georgia. And he was kind of with the second group here up until this past week when Denalyn Morissette was not out there. And then today, Ari Hines said he's the toughest receiver on Purdue to cover because he's so twitchy and fast. And clearly he's got a ton of talent. He's still young, but he's maybe a guy that, especially against a Ball State, you can get going and give him some early season confidence. But really it's the receiving group as a whole, because I just, it's kind of a thing where I think there's some pretty good players there, but you have to see it before you believe it.
I think that's a great answer. And that was, it did kind of make me sit back and think when he said that today too, because I don't think that has always been what we see in practice. I don't know that, Tuggle has made some plays. I just don't know that he's been that consistent. There's been other times where he's been a little bit quiet. And very early in camp, maybe it was the first day of camp, Barry Odom was asked about Nitro Tuggle and said something along the lines of him needing to just get into the playbook better or something like that, like kind of get up to speed. And for a guy who didn't come in until the end of the spring, and you're new and it's the first day of camp, I guess that's kind of all right. I think it's important that did he not come into the end of the spring? Am I remembering that right?
No, he was not here in the spring.
Right. That's what I thought. There was a look on your face like that I had said something wrong.
No, he had the speeding tickets.
Correct. He was definitely in the state of Georgia in the spring. That I was kind of okay. I don't think it's a great look if you're not up to date yet, because they weren't really saying that about other people. But okay, I think that's if he really has emerged now to kind of have that more locked in and be ready to play a big role in the offense. I think that's going to be big for Purdue. I think you are right. Barry Odom already said that Denalyn Morissette's not going to play against Ball State, but they seem very optimistic he'll be back for week 2. Everybody in that receiving room has a little bit of something to prove, I think. They all had individually things they had to prove. But, Barry Odom, the day that he was talking about Ryan Brown being the starter, basically said, okay, now it's up to everybody else to make the quarterback look good, like help the quarterback. Don't make the quarterback look bad. And some other things that have been said recently in camp, Cornell Ford, when we talked to him late in camp, like I feel like the receivers are on notice a little bit that they needed to pick things up, and it did change day to day in camp. There were days that the receivers looked good. There were days where I thought the receivers didn't look good at all, and they're going to just need to be more consistent here as the season gets started. I'm going to pick Braden Joyner here. He's, again, presumptively the starting center. Purdue just doesn't have a lot of margin for error in pretty much any game this season. And they have to have someone reliable and consistent at center. You've got, Ryan Brown has been a starting quarterback at Purdue before, so it's not like it's completely new to him, but this operation is new to him. He's getting to know his offensive line, or has been over these last couple of months, because he's played with Tonona and Trent and Bacon Coley, but not necessarily as a unit. Like, this whole group has been coming together. And there was definitely late into camp uncertainty for sure as to who would be the starter, although we had seen Joyner kind of emerge as the one most often working with the ones in that group. And the reason they needed help there was because earlier in camp, they were having some snap issues, especially in shotgun situations. So they can't have that. Like, this is not a team that is talented enough on offense to overcome a lot of issues in that area. Bad snaps, errant snaps. You can't be giving the ball away, but you also can't be, forcing your quarterback to have to overcome a mistake in order to execute a play. It needs to be smooth there. And maybe that seems like a low bar to set. But in addition to just being part of a unit that has to block well, this is an opportunity for someone like Braden Joyner to come in and establish some stability from game one.
Yeah, that's an excellent choice as well. And somebody I thought of, because you're right. Ethan Trent had played some center throughout camp. Giordano Vaccaro played center throughout camp. And here in the last week and a half or so, it's kind of been Joyner being the guy with that first team. And somebody who has experience playing in big games, having come from Auburn, where I think it was an all freshman team selection. If you're playing as a freshman in the SEC, you're probably somewhat talented. So there's reason to believe that he can translate well coming to Purdue in a starting role. What about defense? Did you pick a defensive X factor player there?
I did pick a defensive X factor there. Thank you for asking, Sam. I picked Jamarian Harkless, who's going to be the starting, we believe, nose tackle next to TJ Lindsey. But the guy's 345 pounds. I think I want to see him go in and assert that. I want to see him go in and force teams. Now, again, Ball State and Southern Illinois, these first two games, it's a different matchup than what you're going to get into later. But this is, again, a good week to sort of make a statement. He needs to be the kind of nose tackle, especially at his size, that forces double teams. When he starts forcing double teams, then these guys next to him that they think are pretty talented, CJ Madden, TJ Lindsey, everybody else that's rotating in there up front, those guys can feast a little bit more easily because they're facing one less blocker. And the more that nose of that size can demand multiple blocks, then even when you have a defensive end who starts to step up and emerge as to maybe a next level kind of guy, it doesn't give teams the freedom to double him. They're going to have to come up with other ways to count for him. That can create some other vulnerabilities. There's sort of like a domino effect. So they're very high on him, and I know why. And we saw some moments in camp that would lead you to believe that this could be a nice combination there in the middle of that starting defensive line. And I just want to see him go out. This would be a good week for someone like that to come in and really take a program that should be a rung down and just assert themselves a little bit. Like I said, dictate terms.
Yeah. I was going to go with Harkless too, but since you picked him,
I'll go elsewhere. There's no rehearsal for this.
I think the obvious choice is Manny Powell. He's the leader of the defense. He's in the middle of that defense. He's the guy in communication with defensive coordinator Mike Shear to make sure everybody's on the same page. And he's really getting an opportunity here that's, even though he played, with Shear at UNLV and before that at Arkansas, I don't think he's ever been in a position to be the man, basically, the guy that everybody's looking to for answers or whatever it might be. So I want to see how he controls the defense from the middle there at his linebacker spot. And just, a lot of good things been said about him since he got here. And now it's a real opportunity, probably a bigger opportunity than he's had through five years, I think, of college football now. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does, especially playing alongside Charles Correa, who he knows pretty well from UNLV, and mixing and matching with the other guys. A lot of different defensive backs are going to rotate in, I believe. I think the defensive interior is pretty well set, but it seems like, there's going to be, obviously, just by the nature of the position, some rotation there. And the defensive ends, I think there's probably 4 guys who could end up playing over the course of a game. He's got to know a lot of different tendencies of a lot of different players over the course of 4 quarters.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have a lot of responsibility as to how this defense operates. I mean, he is the neural connection between Mike Shearer and the rest of the guys on the field. It all flows through him. They have that connection from UNLV, and I think he's a captain for a reason. He one of the guys, along with Tony Grimes, that sort of showed up and just assumed a captaincy, right? Like, I wasn't shocked at all that those guys were both picked as captains, because that's sort of the way they've walked and talked from day one when they transferred. So I think that they are going to be important guys just for do you have that sort of operational cohesion on the field this year? They obviously lost it a lot last season, and they lost it a lot at linebacker. Linebacker was sort of a black hole at times, frankly, and they've got to be significantly better there. And he and Charles Correa, by extension, are the key to making that happen. Let's translate in. Also, I should say, I think Harkless and Powell both, I think, might be factors in this game in particular, just because you are dealing with a team with a mobile quarterback, and that being sound up front, being fundamental up front, and stuffing the run at times is going to be important. So that does factor in, I guess, more to the nature of the original question. If you're looking for a specific X factor, I think that whole run defense is going to be an X factor on Saturday. So usually I think we'll probably give our prediction for the coming game last. We're going to give it to you now, because then it'll lead into our predictions for the season. But Sam, as you look at this game, I needed to get an updated line, and I forgot to. Let me look at it real quick. It was a 19-point line through most of the week, and I want to see if it's moved at all. I'm sorry, I think it was a 17-point line, and it had been moving in Purdue's direction. It's still in that somewhere bouncing around 17 and a half, 18 and a half, anywhere within there. It opened at 16 and a half. So it has moved in Purdue's direction over the course of the week. Ball State with a brand new coach, a lot of unknowns there, even more than ever before, I think, when you go into a season opener. But as you analyze it, what's your score expectation for Saturday?
I was reading through the Ball State notes. I watched the press conference, and Ball State also did not release it too deep. And specifically during the press conference, Ball State's new head coach said, well, Purdue didn't release it too deep. So now it's kind of like you can do in this week one with, I guess, a whole new coaching staff. And both of these rosters are significantly different than the last year game film. There's a lot of secrets to be kept. So it's a battle of who can force the other one to have to do more research or whatever. But anyway, long story short, this is a Purdue graduate, Mike, I don't know how to say his last name, Uramovich, 2000 Purdue grad, actually got his start in coaching, interestingly enough, while he was a student at McCutcheon High School, which is like 3 miles down US 231, working under Don Culler, who left McCutcheon to go be the recruiting coordinator for Joe Tiller at Purdue. I think probably the season after he would have graduated from there. So a lot of ties there. There's a handful of former Purdue players that are on the roster. Purdue's director of operations the last 2 years, Pete Rowley, is now at Ball State. So there's a lot of familiarity there. Not sure that plays a whole lot into how the score is going to be, but I do think this will be a closer game than probably people would anticipate when a Big Ten school plays a MAC school. I went with 35-24. I think it's going to be, a battle for a while. I don't think it's ever going to be to the point where I feel like Ball State has a chance to go out and seize control, but I think that it will be kept close enough that it'll be interesting into the fourth quarter.
So Mike Yarovich comes from Butler. He had some good teams at Butler. I have respect for what he's done as a coach, and I think this could be a good hire for Ball State in the long run. I just can't get myself to a place where I think. I mean, they were 3-9 last year, and I know that whole roster has turned over, just like it has at Purdue, or at least it has in a significant way. But I'm tending to lean a little bit more towards, I guess, how the betting line has gone. Like people over time have taken it towards Purdue, and my estimation has also widened. I'm going something like 41-16. Maybe that opens up more late. Some of this is my expectation that this could be a pretty solid defense. And it would certainly, I think, be a pretty solid defense by MAC standards. We'll see about Big Ten standards. But by MAC standards, I mean, they brought in a lot of they have a lot of veteran group of 5 depth and some other guys with upside beyond that potentially. And I look at this and, Ball State's quarterback, Kyle Kelly, was not their quarterback last year. He was their quarterback a couple years ago, and the previous coaching staff decided to make him something besides a quarterback after a year where he was made several starts. And last year he was a receiver, and they're talking about him being a cornerback at one point. I just don't know that there's a passing game here for Ball State that should challenge Purdue at all. I think if Purdue is putting Ball State in a position where it has to throw the ball, it's potentially really putting Ball State in a problematic spot. Again, some of this it's hard to gauge when both rosters turn over this much. So we are making maybe some sweeping judgments here. But everything I've seen from Purdue, and also I think importantly, this coaching staff, I think everything Barry Odom talks about, and it doesn't necessarily make for the most compelling press conferences. Like even earlier this week, he was talking about the process, and he literally said at one point, like, you should just, drill these things over and over until you're almost numb to it. And again, that doesn't sound like it doesn't like make for great characters who are coming in and getting in front of the microphone. But sometimes if you're turning like humans into football robots, that leads to wins. So that's kind of been their approach, is like make this something where this is really drilled into them. They've done the right things over and over and over again. I just feel like this coaching staff will have things tightened up a little bit more than last season's was, even if the talent level is the same and they can assert themselves in some games like this. So maybe I'm not expecting it necessarily to be a blowout from the start, but I do think there's a depth of talent at Purdue that they should be able to somewhat comfortably win this game in the second half. So that leads us into, what do we expect from this season? And Sam, does that expectation for the season opener have any bearing, or is it reflective of a pessimism that you have over how many wins this team can achieve this season?
I've wavered on this. I've gone back and forth, and I think last year we were pretty unified in thinking that it was like a 4-win team.
We're pretty max. Wrong.
And after one half against Notre Dame, we were like, this team might win 3 games. And it was like, this team might not win again until next season. And now we're here. But,
for the record, I think we predicted by the end of camp, I think you had predicted them to win 6, and I had predicted them to win 5. So I had talked myself up from 4 to better than that, and we were very wrong.
Yeah, very much so. But this team this year, and again, I haven't studied every team on the schedule as of now. It's more of a week-to-week thing that I think you probably are the same way. You start to learn a little bit about these teams. Once it's Big Ten season and you're watching other games throughout the course of the year, you get some familiarity. But I think this is a team that's probably going to win around 4 games. Now, that said, I think that is a good thing for this team if it wins 4 games and competes in some of the other games it loses. That was the big thing last year, was just like the lack of competitiveness, other than, playing a bad Northwestern team at home and playing a bad Michigan State team on the road. There was not a competitive game on that schedule, including the opener, which Purdue won 49-0. So I think this team has significant upgrades in terms of coaching and togetherness, maybe as well. And the competency is just there, where there's going to be ways that Purdue can gain an edge every single week somehow, just from that coaching experience and level of competency in the each position group or head coach or coordinator, whatever those roles might be. So that said, I'm putting together these what do you call it, like crazy predictions or bold predictions or something that our company likes us to put out. And I said that Purdue would start 3-0, which means Purdue would beat USC. And I'm sure, like in my head, I'm trying to talk myself into believing that, but Purdue hasn't started 3-0 since 2007. And I think these two games being at home early against the level of competition they are gets you some momentum. And then maybe you can steal one there early. If that happens, I think Purdue can win 5 or 6 games. But in reality, I don't know that Purdue can win that USC game. So I'm thinking this will be probably a 4-win team that will kind of set itself up to be bowl contenders the year after.
So I should actually recognize those who prompted this part of the discussion. We were going to do it anyway, but Andy had asked, realistically, with the roster turnover, how much can they improve? A bad 1-11 last year, is the ceiling 3 or 4 wins? There's a chance to get to 6 and go bowling. And Brad Eben, who's someone who comments on a lot of our stuff, had made a comparison between 2023 Colorado and 2025 Purdue. Yeah, both brought in over 50 transfers. Both won 1 game with a ton of blowouts the previous year. Can Purdue have a similar season as 2023 Colorado? And that is a team that started 3-0. If people remember, like their big splash was that they beat Texas Christian, which was coming off of a national championship game appearance. Now, as it turned out, TCU was definitely taking a step back, but they opened with a win against Texas Christian. They beat Nebraska, who people were predicting was back and wasn't back yet. It was kind of the annual prediction of Nebraska being back. It turned out not to be true. They beat Colorado State, and then they lose. They only win 1 game the rest of the year. But with a couple of exceptions, a blowout loss at Oregon and a loss at there was one other a weird loss at Washington State late in the year. But they're within like a touchdown, 3 points, 12 points. Like they're in all these games the rest of the year. Could this be a Purdue season that turns out like that? And I think that is a really intriguing comparison, because I think that is the next step. That nobody in that building will or should talk about it like that. They don't have the luxury of doing that. They have to go out and believe they're going to win every game and attack each game like they're going to win, obviously. Only those of us who are taking like the 10,000-foot view, and maybe someday Barry Odom can look back and say, it was rough only winning 4 games that year, but we took the step. This next year when they won 6 or 7, they can point back to that, because I think that Colorado would probably say, I didn't go back and read this after getting that question, but this past season, Colorado obviously took another step forward. I was actually very skeptical of Colorado because they weren't winning any games that really mattered. And then all of a sudden they were, and egg on my face and a number of other people. But
they also had the Heisman Trophy winner. So
they did have arguably the best player in college football. So that is an important difference. And I think this Purdue schedule is even tougher than what that Colorado team had to play. I mean, that Colorado team, yes, it had to play, Texas Christian was ranked, but as we found out later, they weren't that good. They lost by a touchdown to USC, but that USC team was only like an 8-5 team that was ranked 8th at the time. Like it hadn't come back down to earth. They played some other ranked teams late in the year, but nobody that was like at the top of the, a top 5 team. And Purdue's going to have some bigger challenges. I was looking this up. I wrote a piece that the inevitable comparison, can Purdue be the next IU to go from like bottoming out sort of, and then go all the way to the playoff. And the obvious big X factor there is the schedule. And going into last season, yes, Indiana had to play Ohio State, but they didn't play anybody else who was ranked higher than 8th in our preseason Big Ten poll, not national poll, Big Ten poll. Nobody predicted to finish higher than 8th. So people knew that was a soft schedule going in. I think Purdue plays something like 5 of the top 7 and 6 of the top 9. It's just a much tougher schedule. So if the top of this schedule, if some of these teams follow through, it's going to be tough to break through for more wins than that. But I think shooting for something like what Colorado did that year, like get off to a good start, build some momentum, and then they couldn't get over the top in a lot of those other games. But I think if they don't go 3-0, maybe some of those later games aren't as close as they were. And you're not building that same momentum for the next year. And I think this team is probably going to get in some games where it gets thumped, because I think there is still that talent disparity between it and the top of the conference. They don't play Penn State this year. They do play Ohio State. They play Michigan. They play Washington, which I think people expect to be good. USC could be on its way back. We'll see. Like, there's going to be some rough weeks. Notre Dame, we don't know. Very likely this team has a couple weeks that don't look good. But I think if they can cut down on just the magnitude, it wasn't really even the score of some of those games last year, right? It was just the magnitude of it. Like, the other team is scoring and you get the ball back and you just sort of do nothing and give it back to them, and they score. It multiple times last year there were games like that. And that's what they have. That's where this team has to start moving in the right direction. Like, are you competing into the fourth quarter against the vast majority of your schedule?
Yeah, that Notre Dame game last year, mind you, Notre Dame coming off a loss to a MAC school, which probably led us believe that Purdue could compete and possibly beat Notre Dame at home. And it went from like 28-0 to 49-0 in 2 minutes. And that became, kind of a recurring theme. Other than the Illinois game and then the two games I mentioned earlier, the Northwestern and the Michigan State game, Purdue wasn't competitive at all, really at any point in those games. And against Oregon, you kind of expect that. Against Ohio State, you expect that. But like, Oregon State was a team last year that Purdue should have been more competitive with. And I know that Purdue fumbled the ball early in that game that probably cost at least 3 points, but maybe 7 points. Had a weird ball bounce off a guy's leg, turns into a pick six. But those are the things that you were talking about earlier, where Purdue is a team that can't afford to make mistakes and compete and or win games. And so I think that Purdue's going to really have to be not flawless, but pretty mistake-free to get beyond 4 victories this season.
Yeah, I don't know that I think that this collection of talent is better than the collection of talent they had last year. I just don't know that. They had some very talented players who left and are playing elsewhere in college football this year, and I don't think they necessarily replace those guys with players of equal talent. But I do think that this coaching staff is, just by its mere experience and the savvy that you have of, and also the cohesion, the fact that they all have this connection to each other, or pretty much the whole staff has some connection to each other, is going to be a big benefit. I think they're in better position to catch a team on the wrong week for that team and pull off the win. Like, it was right there last year against Nebraska, a team that went to a bowl. Illinois, a team that won 9 games. It was right there against Northwestern. It was right there against Michigan State, and they just couldn't take it. It was right there against Oregon State too. I mean, if they get off to a better start in that game, they very likely win that game. And I think those early ones, especially like last year, we looked at that Nebraska game before the season. We're like, that might be it. Like, if they can win that, even if they're only 2-2 at that point, you've already kind of, put your foot down in the Big Ten a little bit. You've taken a team that has been in your weight class, frankly, for a while, and you've had the advantage on them for a while, and you've beaten them, and now you can move forward into the rest of the Big Ten. And the way that game went, maybe it affected how some things went after that. So I'm looking at this year in sort of like stages. I think this first stage is Ball State and Southern Illinois. Like, those are the games that you have bought that you think are wins on your schedule. And it's not to be disrespectful to Ball State. Purdue can't overlook anybody at this point. They don't have that luxury, but they should be 2-0. Like, every Purdue team ever should be 2-0 when it opens the season against Ball State and Southern Illinois. So I predict that they will be 2-0. Then comes the second stage. It's kind of like the historic stage. You get USC at home, at Notre Dame, Illinois at home. Like, that's, there's sort of an old-timey Rose Bowl connection with USC. That's just a historically strong program. Obviously, the history that exists with Notre Dame and Illinois, those are both legitimate, decades-long rivalries. You play those 3 teams in a row, and you're not out of left field to pick them to be able to upset USC. USC has definitely, last year when they went on the road, it went east in the Big Ten. Things got a little wonky sometimes. They lost to a not very good Maryland team on the road last year. Could this Purdue team be as good as last year's Maryland team? Maybe, but I think people are also expecting USC to potentially be better. I don't know if they can win a game in that stretch. I think that'll be tough. Then comes stage 3, and I feel like this is the meat of the season. Like they go at Minnesota. I actually think Minnesota could be pretty good. At Northwestern and home against Rutgers. I don't know that I think they can win 3 of those, but you can probably, if you can find a way to win 2 of those games, I think they're going to be there. Northwestern and Rutgers, and especially Rutgers, like I respect a lot what Greg Schiano has done, and he's definitely taken them back to a place where they have more respect, but not the kind of program that you think can really go, that you would say can't go on the road to anyone in the Big Ten and potentially still lose. Like that, I think that potential alley is always going to be there. So I think they could get their 4 wins before you get into this 4th final stage, which is the proving ground kind of. It's at Michigan, Ohio State at home, at Washington, IU at home. Like that's all, teams that I think we're probably going to be top 25 or better caliber teams. You got the defending national champion. You got 2 years ago's national champion that people are expecting a bounce back. I think if you're 4-4, I guess is what you would be at that point, right? Mm-hmm. Going into that last stage, you put yourself in position. Can you shock somebody? And I think 5-7 against this schedule looks pretty strong as you're going into this season, considering where this program is starting from.
Yeah.
But I'm predicting, just for the record, I'm predicting 4-8. I think they win 2 of those 3, or even if they only win 1, I think this is the staff that some other week, I don't know what game it would be, but some other week they find a way to pull a shocker.
Yeah. And, the last 2 years, the best game Purdue played all season was against Illinois, coincidentally at home 2 years ago, and then on the road last year. So
they've had Illinois' number now. They've won 15 of the last 20 in that series. Illinois they won 4 straight until last year.
Illinois was really bad for a stretch too, but so was Purdue. So, but I do think there's a game on this schedule somewhere, and I guess I said I'm going to pick Purdue to go 3-0 in this bold predictions thing I'm writing. That Purdue just beat somebody that it's not supposed to. And, that's why I think that there's a potential to get 5 wins. But, I'm playing it safe, I guess, going 4-8 and saying that Purdue will beat the 2 teams it should to start the year. And then somewhere along the way, beat a Northwestern or a Rutgers, teams like that. And then some other games I think that will be there for the taking. I just don't know if some of these guys, there's guys that have played winning football at UNLV, for example, but who have been in these kinds of environments, like playing in the big house is a lot different than playing in the Mountain West, for example, that are ready to kind of get over the hump late in those games. Very similar to the start of this, question, I guess, Colorado of a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and a lot has been made of the fact that, the UNLV core that he brought. But look across this roster, and you've got Memphis. Memphis has been a winning program now. Obviously, Georgia's a winning program. Where else? Like BYU, Utah. Like there's players from a lot of winning programs that have ended up here this year. And some of them weren't significant players necessarily on those teams or were very young, obviously. But I think just being around those cultures and bringing that expectation of excellence, winning, whatever you want to say, can have an effect if the coaching staff has its stuff together. And I think this one might. And I think it would be hard to predict. I think if that shocker comes against USC, I think they will be an underdog against USC no matter how these first 2 games go.
Right.
They might be a significant underdog even at home against USC in that 3rd game. But if they find a way to win that one, and now you are 3-0, it opens up, I think, a lot of things. Now, the schedule doesn't change. You still have to play. Again, this schedule is whatever I said, 5 of the 7, 6 of the 9, and Notre Dame. So that is not an easy schedule. And I think if you were to get to 6-6 in this first year for Barry Odom and make a bowl game, you've kind of taken this thing into hyperspace a little bit. I'm not going to say that it's better or equates to what Kurt Signetti did in year 1 at Indiana, but you have delivered on proof of concept in a major way. I think you can still do that at 4-8 if you go 4-8 in a competitive way, and that you're not having people look down. If you're making teams that you're playing have to really think hard about how they're going to beat you in the second half instead of how soon are we putting in the backup quarterback in the second half. Like, that's the step forward that this program needs to make against the top of the schedule, and against its weight class. It has to start winning. I don't think you can call this a successful season if you don't win a Big Ten game this year.
No, I would agree with that. That's we kind of last year in some ways scoffed at the preseason Big Ten poll that was put out by us, by USA Today Network, that had Purdue picked dead last. And we're kind of like, neither one of us picked Purdue last. And I picked Purdue, 14th, somewhere in that range. So we're both.
We weren't predicting a good team either, but we thought that they could do more like what Ryan Walters' first season was. I was expecting it to be more like that, but actually have been a step forward because it was a tougher schedule.
Yeah. And so anything, after these first two games, it's going to feel like a different season. But if that's the only wins you get, then you're going into next season talking about being on a 10-game losing streak. And the Big Ten losing streak at that point would be, what is it? You play 9 games a year, so it'd be 18 games since Purdue beat Indiana 2 years ago. That's not a good look. And then that's just something that becomes the headline for Purdue is this long Big Ten losing streak. So I think you definitely have to win at least one, but most likely multiple Big Ten games this season to say that you've taken a step in the right direction as a program under a new coaching staff.
Barry Odom has been talking a lot about, it's kind of like he's time traveling. Like he jumps past last year and talks a lot about the tradition at Purdue, something he experienced as a visiting coach and is somewhat familiar with. And then he's talking about the future of Purdue, where this is going to go, and skipping last year. And I think he should. Hardly anybody was around from those 2 years. And certainly this coaching staff was not responsible for what happened in those 2 years. And I would actually say the players weren't really. But this program was just in a Big Ten championship game 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now. That's what they were doing right before this downturn. And I was looking at, the idea of hitting rock bottom and having to pull up from there. And maybe the mass transfer era, that isn't really even a thing you think of anymore because the roster turns over so much. But in some way, in terms of results, that's where Purdue was last year. In some ways, there almost is nowhere to go but up. But I also think that realistically, if you can get that, a jump to 4-8 is really important because of what it means for those players who will stick around. I don't know that we're going to be looking at this coming off season and another 50 some players transferring. Now that you have, revenue sharing, you're certainly not going to be you're not going to lose guys you want to keep as often. And if you can get the right mix of young guys to emerge and assert themselves this season, then 4-8 can really be the stepping stone to something else. We were talking to Hodori Hines after practice day, a second-year guy. Those guys on the defensive line I was talking about have eligibility left. There's guys with eligibility. Ryan Brown has multiple years of eligibility. All those quarterbacks did. There's growth that can happen in every single position group, even in the secondary where you've got so many older guys. Hines, other guys, there's something to build towards there. Smiley Bradford, other younger guys. If you can keep that and make that a nucleus to something, I think 4-8 can be a really positive step. I think that was a really interesting comparison that reader made about Colorado, because in the moment, that Colorado season, because of how they started and because of Deion Sanders and his bluster, that didn't seem like a good season. But it definitely, in retrospect, seems like an important progression to what that became last year.
Yeah, I think it's funny because when that happened was when Purdue hired Ryan Walters, and a lot of people at the time were saying, man, Purdue should get Deion Sanders. I don't know about a lot of people, but some people who were outspoken on social media and people had asked me, would you like Purdue to get Deion Sanders? And I said, absolutely not, because I know the sideshow that comes with that and what we do. It would probably be difficult to do our jobs a little bit, but
it might have been an odd cultural fit too. Like
right.
there's a reason, like Colorado was the kind of place that I guess felt it, but Colorado was, again, they had just had a 1-win season. Like, so they were the ones operating from a position of, I don't know about desperation, but like they had to make a big swing. And Purdue was coming off a Big Ten championship game appearance, and I don't think thought it had to make quite the same kind of swing. But anyway.
Right. No, and yeah, so Deion Sanders goes in there. It tells a whole bunch of players and guys who had already signed, I believe, you're not good enough to play here, go play elsewhere. And there was a lot of negativity that came from reporters from that and just, I guess, people who were fans. But it was, especially in this era, the right move. And if you take a step away, if Deion Sanders isn't the coach and Colorado has the same success, that it had over these seasons, you'd be saying that's a success story. And I think that the reason people tie negativity to that is because Deion Sanders is so outspoken and such a personality and charismatic and just, kind of the things he says sometimes rubs people the wrong way. But if you can have that kind of success and, not all the sideshow antics of what Colorado had to deal with, I think it would be a success story for Purdue to be on that same trajectory.
I mean, you'll take the sideshow if it comes with enough wins. And that's where Colorado got to last year. But I do think in retrospect that maybe that 2023 season was an important turn towards that. You had guys who had to learn how to win. I was trying to ask Barry Odom about that this week, and he sort of steered away from that question because, as you just said, a lot of these guys do know how to win. Like they've come from winning places, and most specifically, they came from a place where some of them came from a place where this specific system, minus the offensive coordinator, but this specific system worked. And on defense and just kind of the general Barry Odomness of it. So there should be some of that belief baked in. I thought we were going to get this done in under 40. We're pushing past 50, so we should probably wrap it up soon. But we will be back post-game after the season opener against Ball State. And we're going to hit you with one of these midweek every week. So it won't always be so football heavy. In fact, maybe next week would be a good opportunity to steer it back towards some basketball talk. But we'll be coming to you at least twice a week here throughout the fall. So for Sam King, I'm Nathan Baird. That was Boilers Extra.